Hey everybody, welcome to my studio. My name is Michael Markowsky and we are going to be making a painting today. And we're going to be making a painting by one of my favorite artists, probably one of the most beloved and most well-known artists in all of Canada, Emily Carr. And she's so well-known that the school that I teach at, the university here in Vancouver of art, is called Emily Carr University of Art. I think it says something fantastic about Canada that our most famous artist is a woman. I can't think off the top of my head of another country in the world that is so honored to have a woman who represents us globally as the sort of preeminent artist in art history. But here we are. This is our fantastic history, so I want to celebrate her and make one of her paintings, one of her probably most colorful paintings as well. Now, if you've never heard of Emily Carr before, I'll be kind of giving a little bit of some history as we go along. So stick around, let's make a painting, and let's have some fun today, because this is, she's one of, I think, the most interesting artists who ever lived. So let's get right to it. Okay. I got my, I got a canvas. We're gonna need one canvas, and we're gonna need our paints today. Again, I don't know if this is the first time you've ever seen me before, but if you're wondering what paints we're using, there is in the image or in the video description below, there is information about that. So I'm not going to go through it all right now, but this is the 12th episode of what will be a 40 episode series. It'll be 41 because there was the very, very first pre-episode was one where I showed how to buy the paints, what kind of paints you need, etc. So watch that. I think each episode sort of builds upon one another, but if you haven't seen those episodes, I'm still trying to keep everything relatively straightforward so you can follow along as well. So, speaking of which, here's our stack of paintings we've made. 12 episodes, and look at all of these awesome paintings. Right? Each one done in about an hour and a half or so. Some of these are different angles. This just makes me so happy to see all of this art. And if you've been painting along with me, I think it's really cool that you also have all of this art, because this is not finished, but this will be eventually, when I get a little bit extra spare time, the cool version of this. All right, this was my Rothko that I started, and then a couple, the Sonia Delaunay at the very beginning. So look at that. In about a month, we've generated so many paintings. And hopefully this is inspiring you to not only pick up painting and paint along with me, but also to start painting your own paintings, because that's ultimately where we want to get to. So, speaking of which, here's the painting that we're going to work on today. Nice, blank, scary canvas. We're going to attack it with a pencil. So get your pencil out, and I'm going to bring up the painting on the screen here that we're going to do. So this here is the Emily Carr painting that we are going to do, and she made this at a relatively early part of her career. She went and studied in northern France and kind of Paris, and so she met a lot of the famous artists that we know of today. And while she was there, she took some art classes, and she took all of that knowledge, brought it back to Canada, and her style really developed and changed. So we'll look at that as we go here, but we're going to work on one of these, on this kind of early painting, because I think it works really well with the progress we've made so far. So we're going to draw that onto this canvas, and then we're going to start applying some basic washes. So let's do that. Oops, let's put this back here. And just gonna zoom out. The other way. There we go. Okay. So, as I like to do, I like to divide the canvas into 4. And I'm just putting the cursor on the screen there, roughly in the middle of this picture. Let's bring this down so it's kind of in the middle here. Okay. So let's draw a line all the way across. I would draw this quite lightly. I started drawing lightly and then I thought maybe it won't show up on the screen, so I'm going to draw it a little bit darker. So obviously you'd want to draw it lightly so that it doesn't mix with your paints and it's not such a problem trying to hide it with paint later. Okay, so where do we begin here? What I would do is I would look for the horizon, and we have like some water and then kind of the top of the hill. So where this water is probably somewhere, you know, not halfway, but a little bit below here. So I'm just going to draw this line. I don't really need to go all the way across because it kind of hides behind this hill or mountain. And then there is this other little hill on the far side. I think this is some sort of a lake right here. And then let's draw this hill that kind of comes up. And right around the middle point kind of comes back down and up again. And here. Okay. And the next thing is there's this kind of circular kind of shape inside here. So I'm going to put that in there. And then I look at it and go, is that right? It looks like I maybe should have, well, we have this kind of hill in the foreground here. And so that kind of tells me, oops, you know what? Maybe this should be more like this. Okay. And I'm going to really quickly, there's some trees down here. And then there's some more trees right here. There's, let me see, there's a kind of house right here. There's another one right around here. And I might just keep it like that. I know there's another one here, but depending on the size of your canvas, trying to add a lot of detail can be kind of difficult. I'm just going to put this little series of trees here. Again, I'm not going to reproduce this painting exactly. I'm just kind of putting in some of these details, and because we're going to paint over everything we see here. It's just about getting the basic composition sorted. I do see that there's that line going across. Maybe should be more something different angle like that. Okay, so let's start putting some paint onto this picture. So let's just take a second and look at her painting and kind of think about what colors we should put down. Now, probably, you know, what she would have done, I imagine she painted this on location, meaning like she brought her paints and an easel and her painting and stood there and made this painting. In fact, here, let me see, I'll go to, this is the actual location in France. I think this is in Brittany, northern France. And so here's the original. People, you can go there and you can stand in the same location. So you can see it's slightly different today. Maybe those bushes that are in the foreground there weren't there before, they weren't so big. Or maybe she, you know, kind of deleted them as she was painting because she thought it would make a better composition. We don't know, but that's one of the things I like about painting, is the opportunity to go like, you know what, these bushes right here are kind of a pain, so maybe she just took them out and then replaced them with this bottom right corner of the picture. I'm not sure. We're not there. We can't know for sure, but I do think this is one of the fun things about painting, is the opportunity to kind of delete things if they're in the way, right? If there's light posts or cars parked in front of a building, you just don't have to paint them. They just disappear, right? So, so let's look at the colors in here and see if we can use our X-ray vision to decode this painting and figure out what colors we should use to begin with. Now, in previous episodes, I've kind of talked about, you know, when we painted the Matisse painting, for instance, we just started painting directly onto the blank white canvas. I mean, we drew with a pencil, but then we just immediately started painting. And that, you know, let's see, we're going to talk about something when I have the actual painting right in front of me. So what happened is we have a bunch of little kind of empty white spots here, which was part of Matisse's, he did that deliberately, right? And it's kind of a provocative gesture on his part, especially considering painting of the day. That would have been really outrageous approach to painting. Now we don't even think twice about it, but it would have been quite a break from a general painting tradition. But painting that way is kind of difficult. I mean, that's because sometimes people don't like to see all of that little, the white of the canvas kind of showing through. So one of the techniques that we've been using over the past few weeks is putting some color on the canvas to begin with. Now, Emily Carr, when she painted this painting, what I imagine she would have done was probably put one single color wash over the whole thing, which is kind of typical for a lot of landscape painters, is to put one color on here. And I think that's what we are going to do today. In some of the other paintings, what we've done is kind of divided it up into a few smaller blocks and then painted over top of that, which, you know, works really well, but it can be a little bit difficult because it's like, well, what color do I really put there? So I'm going to kind of simplify things, and we're going to just imagine that we are Emily Carr ourselves, and we're going out into the landscape with our canvas ready to go. In which case, you might put one color down just to get started, so you don't have to do this and wait for the paint to dry before you get set up. You would have a few of these already prepared, dried in your studio, and you just take one, put it on in your bag, and head out and start painting. So let's do that. And before we do that, I'm just going to show, let's see. Another quick little thing that I did, I'm super proud of this, super excited, is so this is my palette that I've used a number of times here. Let me get another view. And one of the things I just did is I cleaned my palette for the first time in years because there was paint starting to build up. If you look at previous episodes, this thing was quite dirty. So I let it soak overnight so that the water could kind of attack the acrylic, and it was much easier to peel off. And then I used this stuff here, which is kind of like an anti-graffiti spray. And I use this in my classes often when you know, sometimes paint spills on the floor. I spray a little bit of this on there. It just dissolves the paint. Amazing stuff. It is a little bit you know, intense, the smell. So if I'm acting a little manic, it's probably because I sprayed this in here. I have the windows open, but whoo, I feel a little bit I'm buzzing a little bit with this toxic smell in the room right now. But that really helped clean this, and just I also then used some soap and water to clean off any excess chemical here, because I didn't want that material continuing to dissolve new paint I put on the surface. And then just another little thing, I took some Velcro strips and used those to glue these on here, so that now I can just peel these off. And let's say I put the wrong color in the wrong place, I can just switch these around. So I'm super excited about that. I know it's I'm the only person on earth who cares about that, but it does kind of help me a little bit and helps you see what colors we're using here. Okay, so let's start putting some paint on the canvas, or onto my palette, sorry. So I like to organize it this way with my yellow colors at the top. So, and I've got my cool red here. Let's just put a little bit on the canvas, and like I always say, we're putting about as much paint on the on the palette as I would put on my toothbrush. And in this picture, I don't see any black, so we're not going to use any black. When Emily Carr painted this painting, the Impressionists were still pretty much like the leading the celebrated figures at the time. So Impressionism was an art movement most famously championed by Claude Monet and his water lily paintings, if you've seen those. There's a great museum in Paris, l'Orangerie, which is has a few rooms of his giant water lily paintings, and you can go stand inside this oval room and be surrounded by these huge paintings. Amazing. If you're ever in Paris, highly recommend going and check that out. It's certainly one of the... It's still super popular, and there's often lines, but not nearly as busy as, you know, the Louvre or the Musée d'Orsay. Okay, so I will need a little bit of white, so I'm going to put some white right in the middle. And I just took an allergy pill, so I apologize if I'm trying not to sniffle too much because it goes right into the microphone, but hopefully that pill kicks in shortly here. Okay, so let's mix. We're gonna put a warm color down first, and that because most of this picture is middle ground, right? So let me actually bring this up here. So most of her picture is, well, let me see, actually, let's get this view. That's odd. Here, 1 second. Okay, so most of this painting is middle ground, and by middle ground I mean this right here is our foreground, and if we look at the original, by foreground I mean these bushes in the front are in the foreground, the front ground, right? And then this hill is in the middle ground, and then this, the lake and the other side of the lake and the clouds are in the background, right? So this is our foreground, and then most of this is our middle ground, and then we just have this little bit of background in behind here. So it's going to work fairly well to have a relatively warm canvas to start with. If, for instance, we were doing something completely opposite where we might have just a little bit of the ground and a lot of sky, I might consider having a cooler color to start with, because that would help push things back. But we want things to kind of come forward, so we're going to do a warmer color. So the warmer color that we're going to put down kind of an orangey brown, right? So we're going to use some warm yellow, some warm red, a tiny bit of warm blue, very, very tiny bit of warm blue, and maybe even a little speckle of yellow here, or sorry, white. Okay, so I grab my brush and some water, just putting a little bit of water on that brush just to kind of get started. It'll help the paint rub in. Okay, so here's some yellow paint. Let's get some more on here. What I'm doing here is I'm trying to get the paint to get into the bristles a bit here. Okay, now I'm going to take some of this warm red. That was probably a little bit too much. All right, so I'm actually going to take just a smaller brush here. You could use a palette knife for this kind of thing, even though I don't use palette knives very often, although we've talked about it before. Okay, so now we've got a little bit more of an orange. Maybe I'll pull, oops, not that view, I want... There we go. So I'm mixing this together, a little orange. And I'm looking at the painting again, and I think, you know what, this is too dark. So I'm actually going to just squeeze some of this paint off. And I'm going to go right here and get a little more of this, you know, there we go, lightening it up a bit. Okay. Because if I keep on adding yellow into this mixture, it's going to take me quite a long time to lighten it up. There we go. So I've got this. Let's add some white into the mixture. The white is just going to help tone it down, or not tone it down, tint it down a bit, so it's not quite so intense. And put a little bit of blue. In fact, that might be a little too much of the warm blue, so I'm just going to put a little bit off to the side. And let's mix this in. So what we're creating is sort of a little bit of a neutral brown color. And actually what we've also mixed right here is a pretty good skin tone, a Caucasian skin tone, right? We'd probably put a little more white in there if we wanted to get it even a little bit closer. But basically this is a very light brown. Okay, and once I've got that nicely mixed in, and I'm just trying to get some of the paint out of the bristles because a lot of it bunches up inside there. Okay, I'm going to move that off to the side up here. And I'm just going to get a little bit more water in my brush. Because we're making a wash, right? So if we could put a solid block of color without any water in it. The only thing is that if it's really solid like that, you see I'm now just going to apply it right over here, and I like getting all my edges too, is that it could take actually a lot longer for it to dry. So the water is also just going to help speed up the drying time a bit here. We want this underpainting to dry as quickly as possible. We don't want to have to take a 20-minute break and wait for this part to dry. We want to get painting as quickly as possible. Okay, one thing that's happened is I ran out of paint, which is totally fine, and I kind of like that when that happens because it means I got to mix a little bit more, and when I mix a little bit more, it introduces maybe the potential of a little bit of variety happening here. And I like the canvas to be not entirely uniform. I know that that's different than how maybe a lot of, oops, I need a little bit of water on here. That's probably different than a way a lot of people would like it. They want maybe a more uniform underpainting. I personally want it to look like there's, I want the canvas to look as complex as possible, I guess is the long story, is that the more that there's variation in even the underpainting, the more it's going to kind of look like there's that it's not straight out of the tube, that there's different kinds of layers and I guess almost like kind of confuse the viewer a little bit. I think you kind of want people to be like, how on earth was that done? You even want like experienced artists to kind of look at it and be like, huh, I wonder what color was there, and that's just something that I appreciate about painting. And I think the more you take these kind of classes and the more that you paint yourself, you're going to look at paintings differently. If you really are doing these kind of underpaintings and then you go to the Louvre or you go to your local museum or art gallery, you stop sort of just looking at it as, oh, that's a really cool picture of a dog, and you start thinking, well, that's a really cool painting. How is it painted? And your friend might like, what a happy fun dog, and you're like, oh, I wasn't even really thinking about the dog, I was thinking about how this was painted. And they're like, wow, you're a little bit cuckoo, right? But that's what happens the more you get into painting, is you stop really caring about what the painting is of, and you're more interested in how it was made. And so you can kind of see how abstract painting kind of evolves from that, right? Whereas they stop even painting images of anything, and it just becomes shapes and colors and lines, right? Okay, so here is our underpainting, and it's this kind of a little bit peachy kind of, yeah, peach I think is a kind of apt color for this. And so this is going to help make this painting glow a little bit. And it's one of those things that afterwards, like when we, what was it, our last couple paintings, so I'm just going to kill a little bit of a second here while this dries. So let's put this over here. The last few paintings that we made were these Giorgio Morandi paintings. And you remember we put down some washes and then put gray over top of it. So how we got this kind of really interesting kind of color here that we would not be, there's just no way to mix that color and apply it all at once. Because what we did is we painted some cool yellow and a little bit of white, and then painted a gray with a little bit of yellow in it over top once the underpainting had dried. And it just creates this look that I always just, the only way I can explain it is it just looks more professional. It looks more complicated. It looks like something that an amateur couldn't do because they wouldn't understand. But you see how it, you know, we're 10 or 12 episodes into a beginner's painting class, and we're making paintings that look more advanced than maybe our own ability is right now. Same sort of thing here. You know, we painted a cool red and then painted this cool gray over top of it. And it just, again, has this quality that's just impossible to do all at once. Okay. Speaking of which, I would love to show all of the new paintings you guys made from last week, the Morandi paintings. I only got, I think, one image from one person who sent their paintings in. So I would love to show those maybe towards the end of today's class. So if you have some, please send them to me ASAP. If not, we'll show them next class. Okay. So this is almost dry here. I can see where it's still a little bit wet in some of these shinier areas, because that's, as the paint is drying, it gets kind of, or while it's wet, it's shiny, and then once it dries, it goes matte, right? It becomes less reflective. So I want to wait as long as possible before I start painting on it, which is another reason why, you know, there's definitely a lot of artists that might just have blank canvases and they just paint them with a kind of earthy tone like this, and then they're just stacked up waiting to be painted on. So while this is drying here, there's a few places like the background that look like they're pretty much ready to go. So I think I'll start painting on the background. I'll start mixing some colors for that. The reason why I want to wait for it to dry is that if I start trying to paint wet paint onto wet paint, is that not only will the colors mix, which is not such a problem, that can be kind of neat, but it sort of starts wiping that paint away, and it's almost like that top layer of paint won't stick, right? Trying to think of an analogy that I can't think of one off the top of my head, because I like using analogies and metaphors, and I always go to cooking because that's sort of because I like to eat, I guess. But maybe one will come to me. I'm just looking in the comments here. Look at all of the comments. You guys are having a whole conversation here. Jean McCauley says, hi. Amy says, happy Tuesday. Shelley McCool says, hello, everybody. I love Emily Carr. Can't wait for tonight's picture. Jeannie says, Emily Carr is one of my favorite all-time artists. So excited for this painting. Shelley McCool says, this is a good night to be painting. It's snowing. Oh my goodness, Donna, where is it snowing? In Kenora, Ontario. So I'm almost at the Manitoba border. Palash is in California, so probably not too much snow down there in Palash. Donna's in southern Alberta. Palash says it does get a bit chilly in the morning. I spent my entire 20s living in Los Angeles, so I when people say it's cold in California, people laugh at that because it's certainly warmer in California than it is probably most other places. But I do know what you're talking about, Palash. I remember there were times where it was like, because you're closer to the water, when it is cold, it is freezing cold. And oh, Charmaine emailed a painting. Thanks. I saw that you're the one you emailed of the Van Gogh, and I don't think we talked about the Van Gogh ones. That's something. Let's talk about the great paintings you guys made from Van Gogh at the end of today's class. Okay, so looks like this is dry enough. I can still feel the canvas, and it feels cold, which means it's not entirely dry, but it is dry enough. So let's start painting on here. So let's look at this, the original here, and we're going to start, again, right up here, and we're going to paint some cool blue into the sky. So let's get a paintbrush ready for that. I'm going to use kind of a... Well, you know what? She is painting... It looks like she painted this with... We could use a brush like that. You know what? Let's use a brush like this. We're going to paint it the way that she did, so we can see those kind of the shapes of the brush strokes. So what we're going to do is we're going to use... Let me see. I'll rotate it this way so it's upright. We're going to use some cool blue and some white in here. So I'm going to take some white first and put this here, and let's take a little bit of cool blue. Again, it's always easier to darken a color than it is to lighten a color. Alright, so that's pretty good. I like this color. Now, obviously, it's a little bit different than hers. She's got a little bit kind of a lighter, cooler color up top there, but I think this is going to work just fine. So I'll just move this down here. Okay, so she's got these kind of diagonal brush strokes that she put in here. So let's apply the paint in a similar sort of way. So I'm kind of applying little kind of blobs of paint. So, you know, painting in this way requires a certain amount of restraint that can be a little bit like our initial kind of instinct might be just to paint this really quickly one color, you know. So she's kind of resisted that and applied these deliberate brush strokes right over top, right, going for a little bit more of a stylized quality and deliberately allowing us to see some of that painting, the underpainting, kind of coming through there. There's a little bit of space even between the sky and the ground. So I'm just going to be a little bit mindful of that as well. You can see there's times where there's a little bit more white in my paints. I don't mind that personally, but I always think if you're having to mix those colors over and over and over again to paint them onto your canvas, it's just forcing you to learn how to mix paint, and that's always a good thing. The more that because if you have to mix the same color over and over and over again, you just get really good at being able to be really, you know, careful about your color mixing. And this is a pretty simple color that we mixed. I mean, really just cool blue and white. So if later on I want to change or add to this in any way, it's not going to be overly difficult to do. Okay, so now let's paint a little bit of this hillside in the background. So we're going to make a cool yellow, or cool green, I mean. So we can basically keep this same color, same paint that we have on our paintbrush. So we've got the cool blue with white. So I'm going to just take some of this cool yellow and let's put it right here. And just with the paint that I already have on my paintbrush, it lightens up, you know, pretty quickly. Okay. So I'm just going to add just a tiny bit more yellow to this. And let's just paint in here. Now I paint on there, and look how kind of dark, or it's not quite as vibrant as I want it to be. So probably it needs a little bit more white in here. So I'm going to put some white into this paint. And I'm going to have to remix the color a little bit. Maybe too much blue, that's all right. Okay. The good thing about this cool green in the background, and I'm just sort of making up a little bit as I go here, is this cool green is going to go backwards, whereas this, we're going to put warmer colors here. It's going to help push this a little bit forward. So the painting is going to look a little bit different than hers, just because we're using some of these techniques that we've learned. So I'm going to put that there. Let's say, let's get a little bit more yellow on here. Add some more white into this mixture. And just sort of spicing it up a little bit. That's pretty good. Okay. Obviously I'm way simplifying that. I'm trying to think of what other color maybe I want to put down there. Let's see. I think I'm going to wash my brush. And I just got this little rag here that I'm going to use. And I'm going to mix a cool, just a plain cool blue, and I think we're going to put that in the ground as well. Okay. So just for this cool blue, just gonna take the cool blue with a little bit of white. So it's pretty much the same as the sky here. Maybe just a little bit darker. And I'm just going to paint this in here. And again, I'm trying to resist going right up to some of these lines and kind of keep things a little bit just like Emily Carr did, resisting the urge to make a puzzle piece where all of the canvas is covered, so leaving little bits of the canvas showing through. Let's look at her painting again. I can also maybe put a little bit of this in a few different places. And since my paintbrush is still a little bit wet, that paint mixes in pretty nicely. Okay. Now you do see some darker blues that is kind of in the painting here. I'm going to wait for this to dry a little bit before I start putting that there, because I want those that darker color to kind of really sit on top. So I'm going to hold off on that. I am going to put a little bit of cool red on my brush now to make a little bit of a purple. Okay. Because she's got a few little areas of purple in here. Pretty subtle. Okay. I'm pretty happy with this so far. So I'm going to leave this now, and I'm going to start working on the middle ground. Okay? So I'm going to again wash my brush. got a little clamp there to help keep my rag on the table. I've left a few of these brushes in my cup here, and I don't want them to be sitting there for too long. Otherwise, they're going to start to kind of lose their shape. So. And just a little quick tip, if I use my paint brushes and I've washed them and I've set them aside, rather than putting them back with my other paint brushes, I keep them out and then I wash them all again at the very end of my painting session. Because sometimes what happens is you're in the middle of the painting process, you kind of clean your brush kind of just a little bit to get the big glops of paint off, and then you set it aside and you think they're all clean, you put them away. And then next week you're like, oh my goodness, they're all dried. Ah, I should have cleaned them properly at the end, right? So that's what I'm going to do. I've got these cleaned enough that I can paint on them, but not enough that they're fully cleaned. Okay, so the next thing here is this mountain in behind. So I'm going to mix, let's say, a warm green that I'm going to put up in a number of places right now. Now, there is a bit of a neon lime quality to a lot of the greens that are in here. So I am going to use some cool green as well, because I think that this painting demands it, right? So a little same, even though this color is in the background, I'm going to put some of it into the foreground as well. But let's see how we do with some cool, warm green to start. Okay, I'm going to need a little bit more warm yellow here. Oops, that's my cool yellow, so I just put the wrong color down. So I've got plenty of cool yellow, which I don't know if I'm going to be using much of. Darn it. Okay. So we're going to put this here instead. This is how your palette gets nice and dirty really quickly. Okay, so here's this warm yellow. I'm going to add some white to it. Okay. And let's just be, even before I mix anything, let's kind of apply this in a few places, wherever I see that it might be required. So I'm just building up some of these surfaces here, wherever I see kind of something yellowish. And I can paint over some things. That's just more white in the paint. I'm going to just put a lot of this here because we're going to paint over some of that. Let's get more on my brush. And let's put some in here as well. Obviously, I'm going pretty quickly, right? If I was, and actually, you know what, I was going to, Emily Carr probably was painting pretty quickly. You see that there's, especially at this stage of the painting, she probably was going about as fast as I'm going right now. Right? Not overthinking things, because it's just about really filling the canvas in at this point. Okay. So we got, oh, let me see a little bit here too. That's good. Okay. So now I'm going to mix a green. So I want this to be a warmer green. So I'm going to take my this same color that I've just been playing with, I'm going to add a little bit of this warm green. Okay. See, not too much, because we're going to get darker and darker, so I don't want to go too dark immediately. I'm just adding a little bit here. There's still some white in this paint, too. Okay. So let's see, where can we put some of this color? That went to a little bit darker. Okay, so I'm just getting kind of a little bit darker as I go here. Because you want, as we get closer to the picture, I want less and less white in my paint. Even though she does have some white here, the white will tend to make things look like there's air in between us and that. So white works really well for the sky and things in the background because it creates this effect of like atmosphere. Let's get some in here. Okay, and then I think, let's put a little bit of this down here as well. This time I'm just going to put, I'm not going to go into the white. There is white on my brush, but I'm just not adding any extra in here. And I'm just going to start applying. Okay, so already, you know, we've got a pretty good foundation for this painting started. I'm pretty happy with where we're at so far. It doesn't look like much just yet, but we'll get there. We're going to get there for sure. Okay, so I think the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to mix some purple, some warm purple. I'm going to start putting that around because that's a pretty important color for this painting. So let's get some purple on our, I'm going to clean my brush. Going to wipe it off on a rag, my brush onto the rag first. So wiping the paint off on the rag first just makes it easier to wash my brush because I'm not trying to, you know, then my water is going to get really dirty really quickly. Okay, so to mix this purple, basically I'm just going to use the cool red and the cool red and the warm blue. So let's get some cool red out, some warm blue, and mix this together. Ooh, look at that beautiful purple. Yum, yum, yum. What a gorgeous color. I love purple. Okay, and I'm also just kind of swirling my brush in here just so I make sure that the paint is really saturated. Because sometimes you have paint that kind of hides in the bristles, and it's not until you start painting you're like, whoa, where did this color come from? So let's bring this back up here. Okay, now I've got this purple that I just mixed on my paintbrush right now, so maybe before I put any white into it, I'm just going to take a moment to apply some of this right out of the paintbrush. So I'm putting a few little spots in a few different places here, little highlights. Right, so this is kind of like the shadowy parts of some of these trees here. And, you know, I'm not paying too close attention to her original painting, to be quite honest. I just sort of, once I kind of get the composition down, I just start kind of applying paints as I start to see them and where I think, because this painting is going to be my painting, inspired by hers, but not so much as like a faithful reproduction of it. Okay, let's see, there's this. Shape here. Shadow coming across from this big tall tree here. Okay. Pretty cool. I'm already getting pretty excited about this one. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is just take this color and I'm going to add a little bit of white to it, just to tint it up a little. There's a few places that need it. A little bit of white. Don't need too much. A lot goes a long way. You can see the color is different now that I've got white in there, right? And that white also helps protect it from the peachy color that we had below to start with. Right, so that peachy color was mixing with the purple and almost creating a bit of a brown quality, right? But I want a purple, so putting that white in there kind of blocks out some of the peachy colors that were there before. I got this on the building here, this peachy color here. Okay. I can't believe it's snowing already anywhere on Earth. Ugh. Oh well, my wife just got our daughter some snow clothes, you know, parka and stuff the other day, and because it's winter is coming, whether we like it or not. So okay. So I think, you know, if we even just take a look at the painting right now, and so we're not comparing it to the original, and just start looking at how these colors are working to create depth in the picture. Like this area right here, you know, it's got the warm green without any white, or very little bit of white in there, and this undiluted purple, right? So it looks kind of brown. It just already seems to be closer to us. It pushes here, and then this area feels like it's a little bit further away from me in this area, and then this area, the cooler colors also feel like they're a little bit further away from this. So we're just using these super basic principles of painting here to create depth. And again, that's one of the things that abstract painters, you know, they learn how to paint realistically, but they started using those principles of warm and cool colors to create depth in paintings that are non-representational, that don't look like, you know, a dog running through the forest, or, you know, a woman holding an umbrella, you know, standing on the shoreline. They're just a bunch of weird colors contrasting one another, but we start seeing depth inside those paintings. So again, originally when I was much younger, I didn't like abstract painting at all. Like, it was just, I've talked before, when I painted the Rothko, it felt a little bit like an inside joke that I wasn't a part of. But once you start learning how to paint, that kind of stuff starts making sense. You're like, oh, they are just like dialing into a really specific, maybe super geeky aspect of painting. And they're kind of like, you know what, those dogs and people, they're all distractions. I want to get straight to color, right? So, okay. I'm gonna take some paint off my brush. Although, you know what, I'm not gonna wash it completely. I just wiped the excess paint off, because what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna take just my warm blue, and let's see where I can put just some straight out of the tube warm blue. Well, we got some areas in here. Towards the end of these courses, I do want to start making some paintings directly from photographs, and ideally, if it was nice outside, we could paint outside. Or I could paint outside, and we can have the camera rolling, and you can try to paint what I see. We might have to save some of that until next summer, if it's really, really cold. Having said that, I have done lots of paintings outside in the cold. If you check out my website, I did go up to the actual North Pole. A lot of people say North Pole and they mean like Alaska. I went like twice as far north than Alaska and went literally to the North Pole with the Canadian Air Force 5 years ago, and made landscape paintings at the North Pole. So I was the first person to ever make paintings at the North Pole. Little trivia for you there. And on my website, there's some images of the paintings that I made there. So I have experience painting in very, very cold temperatures, and it was a lot of fun, but, you know, probably it's not something most of you are interested in experimenting with during the winter months. And the links to my website are in the video description below there. Okay. So right now we've got a lot. It's this kind of the painting's getting a little bit darker and moodier, right? So we're gonna brighten it up here in a minute again. But let's while I've got this blue in my painting, I'm gonna add some white to it. So I previously had this cool blue with white. Now I've got warm blue with white, different color than what I have up here. And you know, if I put this kind of close, you can start seeing those differences. And you can start seeing that this blue behaves differently, right? It wants to come closer towards us, right? Can you even just see how that right now, that this shape just feels like it's in front of the other shape? I mean, I hope that that's what you're seeing. And I'm sure there's a few people like, I don't know if I'm seeing the same thing, but which is fine, you know. If you know, if you see things differently, well, it doesn't mean that you're wrong. It just means maybe there's an opportunity for you there to express what you see. So let's, the world needs your vision. We need to see what you see. Share it with us. Some little specks of something up here, so I'll put that in here. Okay, how are we doing for time? I think we're doing pretty good. Well, I think we'll be close to wrapping everything up in about 30 minutes at this pace that we're going at right now. Okay, so I think I'm going to apply a little bit of red and some oranges into this. And then we'll put in some greens towards the very end. And I think we're going to use some of those cool greens. But it's important that we establish the warm colors first so that it really does feel like this is in front. We can put some of those highlights of cool colors in there as well. Hi, Deborah. I'm glad to paint with you as well. We're from Almer, Quebec. I'm not sure. I've never heard of that town or city. Quebec, but I love Quebec. We were going to do a bit of a we had a big summer planned, as I've mentioned before, and one of the places I wanted to take our new daughter to was Quebec City and Montreal, but you know, it'll all work out for the best eventually. You know, she's 1 year old, 14 months old, so she won't remember much of it anyway, but okay. So let's put some orange in here. I think that's what we need next. So we're going to use warm red and warm yellow. Here's my warm red, warm yellow. Oops. Right here, get some warm red in here. So basically, this very similar color that we used for the underpainting. Okay, so starting out with something fairly. We're kind of on the yellowier side of things. So I'm just going to start applying some of these. Okay, let's make it a little bit more red. Okay, so it's just warm yellow and warm red, but just a little bit more on the reddish side of things. You can see, woo, all of a sudden that brings some life into this painting. Right? Look how quickly all of a sudden that helps things pop a bit, right? Even though there isn't, well, there's a little bit of red down here. I always think with color, it's nice to spread your color around a little bit. I don't think you don't really want to just have one blob of one color all by itself anywhere in your picture. Otherwise, it just sort of looks a little bit odd. It's sort of like, you know, hanging out there all by itself. You want to kind of integrate it into the overall composition. So sometimes just mixing it a little bit around, adding a little subtle little dots here and there. And you can see I'm applying paint maybe a little bit differently than she did. You know, again, my focus is not making an exact duplicate of her painting. Okay, what else here? Just gonna put a little house here a bit. Gotta be careful not to go too overboard with it. Now I'm just going to add a little bit more red. And I'm just going to put a little bit of this in a few places. Not too much. This is basically my pure red out of the tube. Okay. That's good. Now, am I done with this? I'm always just, before I wash my brush or anything, I kind of want to take a quick look. I think what I want to do is add a little bit of white to this, same color. Get a little bit more of a pinky paint going here. Still a little tiny bit of yellow in there. So this got a bit of a pink quality going on through here. Up in here was kind of pinkish. What would be really fun is to make this painting and then to like actually go to this same location and paint it again. That'll be for maybe next. For a new series of videos, I'll try to recreate all the paintings from this class in the actual locations where they happened. Okay. Cool. That makes me, this is feeling pretty good so far. And I think what's important to realize, like, I mean, I obviously I can't see what other people's paintings are, but you know, if I just stopped here, or I might feel not happy with the painting because it doesn't look exactly like the original to the left, right? But it's important to remember that this is a stage in the painting. It's not the finished painting, and we don't really see the finished painting till the very, very, very end. You know, it's the same sort of thing like if you're cooking, you know, and somebody comes and tastes, you know, the soup before you've put all the ingredients in there, and they're like, oh, it's not very good. And you're like, well, you just chopped up the vegetables and threw it in there. Like, it's not ready. Like, get out of the kitchen, right? So sometimes you got to do the same thing. You got to kick yourself out of the kitchen and just be like, okay, I'm just going to keep on painting, going to have faith it's going to work out, and we'll just keep on working away here steadily, okay? So just wiping the paint off my brush, and we're going to clean the brush. So now we're actually we're much closer to being done with this painting than it might appear. And you know, I personally kind of like this painting as it is right now. But we're going to try to get it a little bit closer to Emily Carr's actual painting here. So that's going to involve a lot more green. So what we're going to do next is we're going to mix a cool green. So we're going to take this cool yellow, a little bit of cool blue. Again, we want to be careful not to go overboard because you see how quickly it changes. So let's take this color and just see what it looks like when we apply it. Let's take a look at what happens with that color when we just take it right out of the tube and just start trying to apply it in a few different places. Right. So we're kind of painting over some other paint that's already there. And it's pretty subtle, right? Because both the cool blue and the cool yellow are very transparent colors, right? So they're not going to, they're not good at hiding other colors that were there before, right? They kind of, they're like window, you know, they let a lot of the color that was there before come through, which can be a pain, but we can also use it to our advantage, because what I'm doing right now is taking it and applying it over top of some of my other colors. And it's kind of, they're mixing a little bit. Even if the colors are dry, I'm kind of mixing, applying this paint over top, and it's almost like a little bit of a wash that I'm doing here. And so I still have these warm colors, but now I've got almost like a cool wash on top that is just sort of very subtly, you know, making these colors pop a little bit more. This is a little bit darker. So where can we put this bit of a cool green? Mix it in a few places here. Some into here, into our foreground. I've got to be careful in this area. We're putting too many cool colors here because then it'll push this area backwards into space, and I don't want that to happen. But I do want a little bit of that same kind of neon lemon color that she's got in that area here. Okay. Wow, look at that. That's making me feel pretty happy. Okay, what else? Where else do we need some paint? Okay. So I'm just before I start adding more paint, I just kind of take a little second just to look around and think like, okay, well, I've still got this paint on my paintbrush, and does it need to go anywhere else? I am a little bit, this is supposed to be this big tree casting this shadow here, and it's not kind of working with the way the original painting, so I'm going to have to fudge that in as we paint here. But that's often what happens when you're replicating other people's paintings, is because if you're not actually in that environment, you don't really know exactly what the actual structure is until you start painting, and then you're like, oh, oops, I missed this important feature. You know, if we were painting this in person, I probably would have caught that a little bit earlier, but anyway. Okay, what else here? So let's go a little bit darker on this green, so a little bit more blue. So even more green in here. Put a few little splashes up front there. Jeannie says, I love your foreground. Oh, thank you. Hopefully it will stay that way as we go through here. Okay. Feeling good so far. So we're gonna add a little bit more of the blue, cool blue into here. So, you know, it's really important to have these warmer colors underneath when I'm applying this cool color over top of it. It just really ensures that that this area is still perceived as being in front rather than in behind. And I may even, I'm still going to put some warmer colors even over top of this, just so that things don't get away from me, but working pretty well so far. So it's the mixing of all of these colors optically that really kind of helps the painting. You know, it because now we've got lots of layers of paint in here. And all those, the light is coming through, bounces off all these surfaces, and then hits our eyes, right? And it just creates this nice complex surface. And okay, we are pretty close here. I think what I want to do now is, what should we do next? I think I want to start. Oh, I'm going to make a little bit of warm green again. I'm going to come into this area and touch it up, and then I think what we're going to do is, then we'll be done pretty shortly here. So we're going to do a little bit of outlining with some darker color, darker blue. Obviously, we could work on this for a lot longer, but the purpose of today is really not to labor over it. It's just to really understanding how these colors are working together and have a little bit of fun, right? Okay. So, the warm blue and the warm yellow. Okay, and take this and bring it over back into my foreground. Just soften some of the intense cool colors that were there. Just going to take this, you know, it's almost, my brush is very little paint, you know, it's like I'm kind of just mixing a little bit of the color that was there with a little bit of warmer colors again. Things were getting a little neon-y. And this is a little bit more of like a grass color. You know, it's just kind of taking some of the candy color out of the painting a bit there. You know, I've just kind of eliminated a tree there, I just noticed. Oh, well. Okay, so I'm going to take the same color. Let's add a little bit of white to it. That's a lot of white. Oops. And let's just see if there's any places that need that. I'm just almost using this as a bit of a highlight. Rectifying this here. That white kind of helps integrate this better into the composition. Okay, oh, there's some brown of the trees that I think we need to put in there as well. Okay, let's clean the brush. Let's make a quick brown. And then we'll be doing some blue outline, and then I think we'll be done. So. Hi, Poetry Jones. New here. Wow, this is gorgeous. Wow, thanks so much. I appreciate that. You can paint along with me as well. I don't know if you're painting along with me, but you can see, you know, it might look pretty complicated at this point, but we've done it step by step, and it's coming along pretty well. So to get this brown, what we're going to do is we're going to turn here. We're just going to take and we're going to make an orange with warm yellow and warm red. Right, so where's my warm yellow? Things are kind of got mixed around a bit, haven't they? So again, this is my cool yellow. That's why I'm not touching it. I put it in the wrong place. So some paint that is going to go unused. Okay, so I've got this orange, and I'm just going to add. I got some this warm blue from before, so I'll just put that here. I can eat some more. Often when I get close to the end of a painting, I get a little cheap, and I'm just like, you know what? Let's just use the last little tiny drips of that paint. Okay, so here's my warm yellow, and here's some warm red. Let's mix this properly. And a bit of blue in there. A little bit more. Looks like there was some white in this mixture. I'm not too happy about that, but I think it'll be fine. Okay. So I can just take this and make a few. These are like the trunks of some trees in here. We don't need to do too much, and it already kind of looks tree-ish. not too... I don't like the way these four trees look here, so maybe we'll... As I go here, I might kind of do a little bit of fixing there to make a decision as to how I want that to work. And I think this brush is a little bit too big for those details, so... Okay, I needed a little bit thinner and also a little bit stiffer of a brush here, because that one was a little bit soft, and sometimes painting with a soft brush is awesome because it just feels really nice, but you're not able to get the sharper details that you want. Okay, where else does this brown need to go? I'm going to put a little brown into these houses. Not super happy with what I just did there, but I don't think anybody else will notice or care. I'm just going to mix a bit more brown here. Some of this into... Obviously the light is coming from this side, so this side we want more light, and then the other side it's going to be darker, so... No, there's not. I don't think there's any brown in her original foreground there. I'm just putting a few in there just to... kind of felt like her painting that area is a little bit of a dead area up there, so I'm just trying to put something in there. I'm going to come back to this area. Felt a little bit unresolved for me, so... Let's say I'm not even going to wash my brush. I'm just going to go into my purple here. So it's going to be kind of a darker brownish purpley color. Pretty dark. It might be too dark, so let's just see. Sometimes this is a little bit dangerous, you know, like I've said before on the show, like this stage of the painting process is the most fun and dangerous part of painting, because you're just like start getting, I'm so close to being done, and then that's when you kind of take your eyes off the prize and some unhappy accidents start happening. So I'm just it's not too bad. I'm gonna put some in here. Okay, so it's definitely darkened down here, maybe more than I would have liked to, but I'm not too concerned about that. Let's put a little bit of the same color in here. Okay. There is a few little colors back here. I'm just going to add a couple of little wisps of cool colors in the background, so it doesn't look totally unfinished up there. So let's just keep these in there. And so I'm going to mix like a cool, same sort of kind of cool brown or cool blue, purple. Sorry. So I'm gonna take my cool red, cool blue. Right, and so we've got a purple, similar purple to this one, but it's just a little bit more on the cool side. Let's get a little bit of white on there. Just being, I'm not putting too much on here. I don't want this to detract too much attention away, but just a little bit of that on the water here. Okay. I feel like I did a little too much of that, but so if I have done too much, let's put a little bit of white and blue. Here. Oh, it's too white. So just touching it up a little bit. And notice one thing, if you do make a mistake, so-called mistake, rather than just fixing that area, what I'm doing is sort of spreading some of that paint out elsewhere, so that we don't just have this one area that we're kind of pulling it around the canvas to kind of spread it out. Okay. So, this is a little darker than I'd hoped, but I want to kind of start wrapping up. So I think I'm just gonna say that that's fine, and we're gonna now just mix our final color, which is going to be a dark kind of color for outlining. So we're going to take our warm blue, take some cool blue. Right, so we got both blues, nice dark blue. And then I'm going to add a little bit of the color on the opposite side of the color wheel, which is a little bit of orange. Right, so I'm going to take a bit of warm red, and I can use some cool red or cool yellows. It doesn't really matter which, because they're all on the opposite side of the color wheel. So we got all those colors crisscrossing through the neutral core, which means we get a really kind of dark gray. So this is going to be pretty much the darkest color that we can mix without using black, because we haven't used any black whatsoever in this entire picture. And so this color works really well for these final little touch-ups, kind of highlights here. See, it works really well for outlining things. Got to be, careful when you're doing this, because it is, a very dominant kind of color, right? So we don't want to put it everywhere, or you could, but it'll change your picture quickly. So I'm just being mindful of that fact. Down into here. So this area on the screen looks pretty dark. It's not quite as dark as it actually is in person, but it is darker certainly than hers. And just the way that they're all kind of lined up like that drives me a little bit nuts. Like, there should be a little bit more variation in these. So let's just see if I can make some little changes here. Okay, now I'm just going to do a little bit of outlining on these houses. Now, ideally, we wouldn't just use the same color for all outlines. For our purpose, it's okay. But ideally, you would you could be mixing a bunch of different colors, kind of changing. Like, I mean, which I can do right now. I mean, let's say I add a little bit more cool red into this mixture, and so we just have, you know, slightly different colors here. Right, and that just makes things look like they're, you know, that we're trying to just create a little bit, you know, just more, what would you say, variety in here. Again, that's, when I think of like complexity, that's sort of what I'm talking about. I'm just going to take that same color and put it a few different places. Again, this area down here is certainly much darker than hers, but I just felt like my painting, you know, it started to take on a life of its own, and rather than trying to pull it back into hers, I'm just kind of going with it, embracing where my painting is taking me, which is what I hope happens for you as well. And that's one of the most exciting things, is when you're making a painting and it starts telling you what it needs, and you're starting to look at it, and it's saying like, oh, I want more darker colors right here, and you're like, oh, okay, I'll do whatever you say, painting. Because that's what kind of happens. The painting starts talking to you, and it starts to kind of refuse certain things, and it'll only accept certain things, and if you try to kind of wrestle it into something else, it's going to fight you. It will absolutely fight you. It sounds nuts, but at some point you just have to, like, let it do its thing. Okay. That color kind of looks nice up in here. Okay. I think I want to just darken this a little bit. I know, which sounds crazy because I've been saying it's too dark, but I feel like just these trees all being the same height and stuff is just not really working. I could, yeah, let's I'm gonna wipe my brush off. I'm not gonna bother cleaning it, but let's get some warm blue, warm green. Oy, oy, oy. That was not what I wanted to do. Okay, so if you make a little happy accident, one thing I could do is try to wipe some of that paint off, and if I'm quick, it can disappear. If it was if I waited a little bit longer, I could add a little bit of water. You want to be careful because then you could wipe off too much paint. I still want to attack this here. And I've got a little bit more paint. Let's use a different brush here. So I'm going to take... just squeeze more paint out on there, Michael. I'm the kind of guy who, like, has, you know, squeezes every little bit of toothpaste out of the tube. So, that's... because I can't... It drives me nuts seeing... Because, like, this big blob of yellow is going to go into the garbage after today's class. And I just feel, like, so terrible about that. I feel like just wasting all this material. So, always trying to think of... Okay, what could I do here to resolve this? And I've got kind of this... orange. Let's see if I paint that over top. Does that help things? A little bit. Okay. I do notice I'm looking at a few things. There's a little bit of white that could go into a few of these places here. Little highlights that I might have missed, I think. So, but it gets dangerous starting something like that at this point. I am going to do it. So we're going to put in, we've got some white and some warm blue. Oops. Mixing that up here. Ooh, I don't know. It's always tricky adding things like this towards the end of a painting. Little highlights that I think need to be here. So I could make this much whiter, but you know what? I'm not too happy with a lot of what I just did. I'm just going to try soaking a bit of it with my rag up a bit. Well, you know, I've kind of committed myself by doing that. So I'm just going to go a little bit more white. You know, they say you gotta know when to fold them, know when to walk away, right? Okay, I don't think this painting is going to get any better with me fiddling here right before I'm done. But you know, this might be stuff that most other people wouldn't even think about or care about or even notice. But you know, this is stuff that as a painter, you kind of obsess over little details, and you kind of want, obviously you want it to be as good as you possibly can do it. So, okay, I think that's good enough for right now. It's not exactly, I'm not totally blown away by it, but I feel like for, you know, an hour and a half or so of actual painting, it's pretty good. Good enough that I can feel good about it. Okay. So I'm going to, as always, sign this picture here. So it is, you can see it's not quite as dark down there, just the light is being absorbed by my belly. If I have my white t-shirt on, you can see it'll start reflecting more light. You can see, look at how, you see how it darkens things a little bit. Anyway, okay, so this is good enough for government work, as my grandfather used to say. And so I'm going to put this one aside rather than continue to fumble with it endlessly. I feel like I'm pretty happy with that. So I do want to just take the last couple of minutes here to show the amazing paintings that you guys have done. Let me see here. I think I'll show the Van Gogh paintings. And come on. Oh. That you guys did. Ah, come on. There we go. So let's. Okay, so let's take a look at your guys' amazing artworks here. So this painting Charmaine sent in, of her version of Vincent van Gogh's Starry Night. Great work. You actually put a lot more detail into the sky than I was able to do. So I don't know if you were working a little more afterwards or you just were a very fast painter, but this turned out really, really good. Really happy with the sky especially. I think you really nailed this kind of swirling kind of effect. And then the hill worked really well, and I think you did actually a great job with the ground here too. There's just that real kind of immediate sense of movement in this picture, and of course the tree, the central tree in the foreground, worked really well. One thing I would say, just in terms of the difference between your work and Van Gogh's, is his brushstrokes. They're maybe a little bit longer than yours. This looks almost a little bit more like pointillism, like little dots on the canvas. And one thing with Van Gogh's lines is that they end up kind of creating, like, it's almost like a dotted line. So there's more of each line seems to connect almost to the next one, whereas here they're a little bit more just like dots that are more isolated. And that's also, I did the same thing myself, so I'm not saying you did anything wrong. But it's just, to get a little bit closer to that Van Gogh effect is just sort of thinking about them as, it's almost like stitching on like a shirt, right? That's kind of more the effect that Van Gogh, I think, was after. G sent this. I'm sorry, I can't even remember exactly how you say your name. Is that GI or GL? And I know you sent me some messages here, but that's like your screen name. So, how can I get this to share properly? But very cool. It's a little bit pixelated because I'm zoomed in a bit, but obviously we get the effect here. I really like the swirls that you've put into your image here. There's, again, one thing that's great about Van Gogh is the intensity, and like we see the immediacy of the brushstrokes, like how quickly he's painting things, and you really get that feeling here with these kind of swirls and the kind of dramatic brushstrokes that you're applying here. Worked really, really well. You know, I also really like this hill in here, and the contrast between this, like maybe the sunset, you know, over the horizon, and these hills works really well. That's fantastic. And then this tree here. One little thing, just is that this star and its light appears to kind of overlap the tree just a little bit, so it makes that star look like it's in front of the tree. So all you would need to do is put a little tiny brush stroke on there to break up that circle, and then immediately that star, which is in front, pops backwards, right? So, I mean, otherwise fantastic, great job. Yeah, you know, same sort of thing I was just saying about Charmets with the kind of dots, is just thinking about them as being like stitches on a thread and almost trying to follow the line as you go. And here's Peter Lee's painting. Let's see, let's zoom in. Oops. On this here. Cool. Again, so I think, Peter, you did an even better job than I did with that kind of stitching. Like, we see a little bit more of that in here, so everything kind of feels a little bit more kind of flowing, like those lines are supposed to do, right? So that worked really well. And again, very kind of fast, immediate application of paint in here. Worked really, really well. I really like the sky. I think the sky, it was really successful. I think it's this light blue and light purple, you know, that have that tint, a little bit of white in there, that worked as kind of one of the final layers. Was really, really effective. Great job. Yeah, I mean, I also, just this color, that teal color, works really well, even a little bit into the middle ground. Great job. Okay. This here, wow, cool. Yes, I love these, like, again, everyone's done a great job with these kind of faster, you know, brush strokes. You know, like this feels like a really windy, starry night. Like, I really feel like that swirling, like the immediacy of the swirling in the sky, and it feels like it's almost like going to blow over this the steeple of this church. So that's fantastic. This is great. Really great work. I hope you guys are saving these and you're going to hang them on your walls, because you guys are making amazing pictures. I think in your message you were saying that the lighting changed in between these two, because I think this is the same picture, right? So, but they both look fantastic. Obviously this one is a lot more yellow and green than this one appears. This is a little bit more diluted colors, but you know, same sort of thing. They're fantastic. And I think we have just one more we'll look at here before we sign off for the day. Is this, oh, it's funny because we're looking at all of the same paintings over and over again, so I'm like, is it this? I think this is, yeah, I don't think we've looked at this one yet. This is Vania Elisa. Hope hope I'm pronouncing people's names correct. As I say to people all the time, I pronounced my name wrong at my own wedding, right? So if if I pronounce other people's names wrong, it's just I have a horrible habit of doing so, and it's nothing personal. But anyway, great. I actually really like the way that the paint that you've applied over top of the underpainting has worked really well. Like, this is a very confident application of paint for these houses. Works really, really well. And you know, it's really hard to allow yourself to allow this much room between some of those brush strokes. So you've done a fantastic job in these areas in particular. And then same sort of thing, like I was saying with Peter's, we've got a nice swirling effect, these nice brush strokes up in the sky. And the tree, I think, worked out really well. I like this green just popping through. And it looks like this is a relatively small painting too, so you're working on a small canvas, so great job. So those are all of the submissions that I got from people. Now, if you have more and I didn't see them online, I apologize. I'm going to wrap up right now because we've been at this for a couple of hours, and I'm sure maybe like me, you're a little bit hungry and you want to, but maybe you paused earlier and got yourself a sandwich. Lucky you, right? So next class we're going to be talking about another fantastic painter, Miro. And we're a totally different painting than the one we painted today. It's another sort of a landscape, very playful, super colorful image. And for those of you that want to do something a little bit more abstract, this is kind of going in a little bit more in that vein. But even the things that we're going to talk about apply to doing more representational pictures like the one we did of Emily Carr earlier today. Oh, you know what? I forgot to just show you a little bit of her paintings. Just give me, why did that disappear? That's bizarre. So let me just get this up here. I just want to show you a little bit of Emily Carr's work just before I sign off. The painting that we did today, this is in the collection of the National Gallery of Canada. So you can check out their website to read a little bit more about that. But here's more of her paintings. You can see that the one we did today is a little bit more of an outlier. Like the paintings that she did that are more well known are these paintings that she made up in what is now called Haida Gwaii, or what used to be called the Queen Charlotte Islands, which is a whole massive chain of islands kind of off the coast of Alaska in northern British Columbia. My wife and I went there a couple of years ago. I don't know, my timing is so mixed up these days, but we did. We went up there with my father-in-law and his partner, and probably the most beautiful place that I've ever been to on Earth. And in the back of my mind, I think that would be a really lovely place to one day live. If you haven't visited, that should be on your bucket list, no matter where you are, but especially if you're Canadian, you got to go to Haida Gwaii. Great people, amazing landscape. It's super quiet. If you're into stars and you want to see night sky and do some astrophotography or stuff, like beautiful big night skies. Anyway, I could go on and on. So these are, she's very famous for having painted these totem poles by the indigenous people that were there, that are still there, sorry. And, you know, so there's also an opportunity to go visit all of the carvers that live up there. Here's a picture of Emily Carr. I'm going to sell me something again here. So she's also, she was born and raised and ultimately passed away in Victoria, British Columbia, the capital of BC. And you can go visit her childhood home there. You know, super interesting character. She's also like a feminist icon. I don't think she married or had any children, certainly didn't have any children. She lived most of her life by herself, And there's a really cool sculpture of hers next to the Parliament building or Legislature building in Victoria, of her with her monkey and cat and dog. She had a number of different animals, definitely a monkey on her shoulder. And lastly, there's any more photos of her? Sorry to scroll through. She is really well known for, let me see, she actually became well known for her writing before she, I think she won the Governor General's Award for literature, and so she kind of became really well known as an author right towards the very, very end of her life. So she was painting in total obscurity. She was known by her friends really well, but not by the wider public until she started publishing her writing, and she became super successful as a writer. And people were like, oh, and then by the way, she actually is an amazing painter. So, you know, she published, I think it was Clewick, which was her partly an autobiography, and then she became this huge Canadian celebrity. And then people were like, oh, by the way, these amazing paintings. People started collecting and buying her paintings immediately afterwards. And I think she passed away about 5 years after that. So she's one of these persons that just like was super dedicated. She's stuck to painting her whole life, through the ups and downs. I think she kind of like not gave up painting, but for about 20 years of her life, she was taught children and sort of painted on the side, and then I think she retired and then started kind of devoting herself back to painting again. Just a really interesting, fascinating story, and she told it herself. Like there's maybe 12 books that she wrote that are all either directly autobiographical or are kind of veiled, you know, or autobiographical stories. Great writer, funny writer. Highly recommend reading her work. Just absolutely beloved character. I think it's fantastic that she is as well known as she is today. She definitely deserves it, and her paintings they stand on their own as some of the greatest in not only Canadian history but in modern art history for sure. So let me just quickly go over some of these comments that I see here. Thank you for all the lovely comments about my painting. I appreciate that. The vibrancy of the colors. Thank you. Jean says, I can't wait till you do my favorite artist, Maud Lewis. Yes, so we're going to be painting... I don't have it open, but we've got lots of great artists coming up later on. And Maud Lewis, another very famous Canadian artist, very, very different artist to Emily Carr, but also, likewise another icon in Canadian painting history. And I mean, I think most people don't even know she's Canadian because she's so famous beyond Canada. Poetry Jones says, do I take requests? I'm certainly open to it. If you got a great idea and you want to throw it out there, I'd be happy to see if I can incorporate it into the next 38 paintings that we're gonna do. Deborah says, I was getting frustrated that it did not look like yours, and then I realized that I stopped listening and followed my instinct. Waiting for you. I am very pleased with this class. Thank you so much. That's a great way to look at this whole process. Is, you can, just like I'm doing, I take Emily Carr's work and I start kind of painting along with her, and then at some point I'm like, if you like are watching the video and you see that I'm her painting is like off on the side and I'm hardly looking at it, because I just start kind of diving into my own painting. And it's easy for me to do that because I've been painting for 20 years or more. So, obviously it's easier said than done for those of you that are just starting out. But at some point, just allow your painting to live its own life and to just embrace what it's doing. And stop trying to fight it and push it into something that it's not, right? You can always try painting the painting over again and taking lessons that you've learned and see if you can kind of push it into a different direction. And it's easier to push it into a different direction from an earlier stage than when you're further down the road, right? Yes, Poetry Jones says Peter really captured the form around or caught the form of the foreground tree. Yes, I agree. Thank you very much. I love how engaged you guys are in the comments here. These are great. And let me see. Sue says, I was just in Victoria and saw her sculpture. They have an exhibition of her works right now at the Royal BC Museum. I think that's, yeah, Royal, I can't remember, the Royal Museum or whatever it is up there. Is that maybe where you saw it? I mean, BC, one of the things about being in British Columbia is we have like 80% of her work is here in Vancouver and Victoria. And then a few are scattered out east in Toronto and in Ottawa at the National Gallery. So here in Vancouver or on the West Coast, we are kind of inundated with her work, which is not a bad thing. But it's the same sort of thing if you go out east and you go to Toronto, you see all the Group of 7 paintings and all the Tom Thompson paintings, which I love, but there's very few of those paintings here on the West Coast. So just out on the East Coast, people are kind of see so much Group of 7 stuff they kind of get sick of it, whereas us on the West Coast, we go there and we're like, oh my goodness, it's so amazing. Same thing, there's less of her work out there, but you know. Anyway, and lastly here, I appreciate Donna here has left a $10 donation through the super chat, which I keep forgetting to mention, but just kind of going forward, if you do want to leave a small donation, you can send it directly through YouTube. You've been able to do this forever, but I just finally set it up last week, so that's one way to help support the show. Also, if you want to send some money through PayPal, there's a link in the video description below. So lots of different ways that you can help contribute and support and to help keep the lights on. All of the things that you see, I was just looking at some of the first videos that I did back when I was starting to teach my drawing class back in April, and you could see this studio was totally unfinished. It was like very, very different than it is now, and that was just through the money that you guys contributed to have been able to build this up and make it look a lot nicer, more appealing to the eye while you're painting and following along. So lastly, please like and subscribe to the channel. That just helps more and more people like Poetry Drones find this class and be able to participate in it. So if you're enjoying it and you don't want or don't have any money to contribute, a simple like and subscribe or sharing it on your Facebook, letting your friends know that this is something you're doing that you appreciate. Because wouldn't it be great if everybody on Earth was a painter, or at least knew how to express themselves artistically a little bit? I think we would live in a much more peaceful, harmonious world. That's the world that I want to live in, and that's why I'm doing these classes for free, is because I'm trying to spread my joy and love of art out there into the world. So thank you, everybody. Have yourself a wonderful rest of your evening. We'll see you later this week when we do our Miro painting. So get ready for that and have your paints and everything ready for another exciting painting class. Have yourself a wonderful afternoon, morning, dinner, whatever you guys are up to. And waiting for this to load up. Oh, something's happening here. Okay, I guess I can't get my final graphic up on the screen, which is a bummer. So, let's just bring this down here. Put this here. Let's zoom in on our painting for today. Okay, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your day. We'll talk to you soon. Thanks so much.